Oi, aqui é a Tamiris do Resenhando Sonhos, e em abril eu tive a oportunidade de entrevistar o Brandon Sanderson para a Flea Fantasy, a primeira edição do Festival Literário de Fantasia, e hoje eu tô aqui para compartilhar essa entrevista com vocês. First of all, thank you for taking the time to talking to us. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'm very happy to be here today. So let's start talking about Mistborn, which is the new release that's coming back to Brazil after many, many years, our print. And it is a fan favorite. And the story that you recommend for entry into the Cosmere. And me being a content creator who talks about your work, this is the most asked question ever, every time you release a new book. So to celebrate this release, could you please confirm that it's okay to start with Mistborn and tell us why this is such a special story and the perfect entry in the Cosmere?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited that we're getting a new Brazilian edition. When I heard that the old edition was going out of print because publishing in Brazil was having trouble, it kind of crushed me a little bit because I knew how many people liked the book series there, and publishing as a whole in Brazil got really hit hard right around the COVID period. And so being able to have Mistborn back out is very exciting. And I do consider it the best entry point into my books. There's a couple of reasons for this. I do a lot of different things in my novels, and Mistborn does a little of each of them, right? It's a good survey in that way where it kind of shows off how I world build, how I do character, how I approach character dynamics and relationships. Beyond that, when I sat down to write Mistborn, what I wanted to do was tell a self-contained story in one volume. And I think it's really important that even though there's a trilogy, that people are able to read something by an author when they're trying them out and find a complete story. And I can't promise them that with Stormlight Archive, right? Stormlight Archive isn't, each volume is not a complete story. It's a continuing saga in a different sort of way. Mistborn 1 is really self-contained. And I feel like that makes it an excellent entry point. Perhaps the best one, like I said.
Great. And for the new readers that are going to read Mistborn for the first time, they are about to meet one of your most iconic and beloved characters. And maybe this is my opinion, but I'm talking about Kelsier. So could you tell us a little bit more about him, and maybe to make a little more interesting, use some metal comparisons?
Okay. Let's see. So for those who haven't read Mistborn, the basic pitch is this. It's a world where the Dark Lord won. Imagine, Lord of the Rings. But at the end of Lord of the Rings, Frodo walks into Mount Doom and Sauron's there. He's like, hey, my ring. I've been looking for that. Thank you for that. Must have been a really hard journey. And then he killed Frodo and took over the world. The Mistborn's world where there was a prophecy, there was a hero failed, Dark Lord took over. And it's a heist story. It's a story about a gang of thieves who decide they're going to try to rob the Dark Lord. And I needed for this story to work. This story brewed in my head for a long time. For a while, I was going to tell the story of how the hero failed. And then I thought that would just be a downer. And beyond that, I've seen so many stories about the prophesied hero and things like that. I want to do something different. So I shelved the idea for a number of years until I hit on Kelsier as a character. And Kelsier, what makes him tick is he's spent his life learning to be a kind of upper class thief, right? He's the type of nobleman, half thief who can pull cons on the richest people. Something went wrong in his life a few years ago where one of his heists went wrong. And this sent him thinking about the consequences of the frivolous life he's led and started him wondering if there are bigger goals he should be shooting for, if there's more that he should be trying, if he can somehow use his skill, which is for heisting people, to do good things for the world. And he started to have this shift. Kelsier's interesting because he, if you want to use a metal analogy, like you said, he's one part gold and one part steel. He's an alloy between these two. He's one part all glitz, and he's one part hard edge. There's someone deep beneath him that in a lot of other stories would be a villain. He is ruthless. He has been made much more so by what happened in his near past. But he also knows how to put on a show. And it is fortunate for the entire world that he got channeled the right direction instead of the wrong direction. And Mistborn is the story of what happens when he gets channeled the right direction.
Oh, great representation. Now that we have Mistborn republished here, we can focus on asking for some other titles because we are putting a lot of work on that. And the social media of Drama loves us. So considering that we have Stormlight with the 4th coming this year, Rhythm of War, we have now the first era of Mistborn, and we are having also the Secret Projects with Yumi arriving in 2025. So what other story within the Cosmere do you think we should focus on requesting now? What is the missing piece for the Brazilian
readers? Do you have
readers?
Warbreaker yet?
We have Warbreaker.
You have Warbreaker. Okay. You have Warbreaker. So that's kind of the next in line missing piece. After that, I really do think the Wax and Wayne books are pretty good. And I know were there initially Brazilian editions of those? I swear I have Brazilian editions. And they're probably out of print as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's interesting because the Wax and Wayne books, which are also in the Mistborn world, are, I think, some of my best writing. But they kind of require you to have read the Mistborn original trilogy to read them.
Yes.
And they tie in very well to the Secret Story, which is now on pre-order. And so I would say that is where you want to go in requesting next. And then, of course, we have Isles of the Emberdark coming out this year in the U.S., which is, Secret Project 5. And so if you have Yumi, you probably have Tress already.
Yes.
So you might not have Sunlit Man, which
Not
is
yet.
really relevant for Stormlight 5, and then Isles of the Emberdark.
Okay, we're gonna focus on that.
Yeah.
Well, you are writing now the 3rd era of Mistborn, Ghostbloods,
I am.
and in a universe as robust as the Cosmere, in a series that already has a lot of lore, how you prepare to return to Scandrial? Are you able to retain everything? Do you have to revisit your work? How is the process to come back to a world that is already alive?
I'm pretty good with this, but I am not perfect. That is why I have a whole continuity editor team. I have particularly Karen. Karen Ahlstrom is my primary continuity editor. And she took over when I hired her the wiki that I had been keeping for myself to keep everything straight. And now she maintains that. And it's super handy to have this giant encyclopedia of all of my worlds and all the quotes from the books describing people and things like that. I am pretty decent. One of the nice things about Era 3 is I outlined kind of the initial idea. It was only a page, which is why there's a lot more work in outlining to do. But I outlined the initial idea in 2006 when I outlined the original trilogy. And so this trilogy's outline is tied very deeply to the original trilogy. Wax and Wayne I wrote a little bit on a lark. And that means I've spent the last 20 years, kind of almost pretending that the book series is already done. Like I know all of the things in it, and they are key to other things I've been doing in the Cosmere. It's part of continuity already. And so it's harder to forget because I'm always focused on tweaking it in my head and making sure that these things are all going to spin together. It's the books I wrote on a lark that sometimes have more trouble with the continuity than the ones that I've been had outlines for 20 years.
Great. Before the release of the 5th book of the Stormlight Archive, you gave an interview talking about how much this book could change your career and your relationship with the fans.
Yep.
So it's been a few months. Can you already say that you noticed something?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Stormlight 5 was a bomb I dropped on the fandom, and it is it's. I'll try not to go into spoilers at all, other than talk about tone. I am shifting tone, and Stormlight 5's job is to kind of make people uncomfortable, um, to make questions they thought were coming to a close, to take those and open them in ways that they didn't expect. I don't anticipate people will quite understand even what's fully going on with Stormlight 5 until I can get them 6, 7, and 8, right? And so I have noticed the response that I expected from Stormlight 5. Let's just say that.
Okay. Let's move on to talk a little bit about adaptations. We know that you have a few things in the works: Snapshot, Cytoverse, Stress, in different stages of the process. Yep. But you are so looking for bigger things.
I am.
And so I wanted to know, not only from the point of view of an author that is trying to get your work adapted, but also from the point of view that someone that consumes series, because you have already talked about other adaptations like The Witcher, Rings of Power. Rings of Power? Yes, Rings of Power, and The Wheel of Time. So for you, what do you think it is right now the biggest challenge of having a good adaptation, and how do you think is the way to solve that problem?
Yeah, what an excellent question. Really, really astute question. The biggest challenge, I would say, is that the people who are buying these properties need to understand what about them people enjoy. Now, the writers, I'm convinced, almost always know. The showrunners, they understand generally. The people on the lower levels working on this. But my experience has been in Hollywood that the people at the top, the large-scale business people, they don't understand what's unique about properties. What they do is they see a success like Game of Thrones, and they say, well, buy us a fantasy book series because it will be another Game of Thrones. Not understanding that fantasy has just an enormous range of different types of stories being told. And some of them are appropriate to adapt in a Game of Thrones style political intrigue, lots of adult content sort of things, in a brutal world. Like, it matches George's writing. The way they made that show, they did an excellent job. Because Game of Thrones is built around the idea of a fictionalized War of the Roses to show all of the depravity that happens at the higher echelons of noble society. But going and buying other series, like, for instance, even looking at The Witcher, The Witcher's fiction is best in its short story form, right? Sapkowski's little looks at a fascinating world as one character experiences something odd and mysterious, and that works so well. And the best episodes of The Witcher are the ones where they take that and they translate it across. What are the worst episodes? When someone up above says, oh, this needs to be a giant interconnected thing, and it needs to feel more like Game of Thrones. Witcher should be brutal, but Witcher should be more episodic. And I've noticed this with just lots of things. They buy them and they don't know why they were beloved. Obviously, some people can make it work. Last of Us is a great example. Fallout's a great example. But too often I've found in the fantasy world, the execs just don't read fantasy. They don't understand what we're trying to do. And so they buy the things without wanting to buy the heart and soul of the book. They just want the name recognition. Yeah. What do we do to change that? We stop selling things to them. I don't know. Like, Hollywood says, well, we can't let the authors be in charge. Well, maybe we stop selling things quite as much without more promises that they are actually wanting to make the thing that they're buying. I still cannot believe Halo. I still cannot believe it. I'm in awe of how majestically they failed in making a Halo show that basically never goes to Halo. It's baffling to me how this happens.
Okay. And well, let's think in a positive way here. We're going to have a Cosmere adaptation one day.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable.
What scene do you really want to see adapted? And if you already thought about, where do you want to do your cameo appearance?
Oh, yes, I have been thinking about these. So I actually had to answer these questions when we almost got Mistborn made with a very good company that I was working with for a while to get it made. And it just fell through for various reasons. And the scene I told them, I'll do it without spoiler. It's a scene where a bunch of coins go through a stained glass window, and then the window explodes and someone comes through. It's one of my favorite cinematic scenes from Mistborn. And I'm like, that one, I want to be there in the storyboarding of this one. I want to show you how this needs to come together. And so where's my cameo? So I've often thought that the best cameo for me would be to be someone who is often in the background when a disaster occurs and gets destroyed or killed or eaten by monsters in some way, as recompense for how I have perhaps treated some characters through the course of the series. And so in every film, I die in a new way. I've always thought that was fun. Peter Jackson let himself get shot with an arrow when he did his cameo in Lord of the Rings, and I've always remembered that. So it's less Grandpa Stan Lee showing up and being nice, and more, let's see how Brandon dies in this one. I can be the Kenny from South Park of the Cosmere.
So I hope we are able to see that. Moving on to a more serious topic. The more traditional fandom of fantasy, especially epic fantasy, I think, is still very reluctant to accept stories that feature representation. And one of the most critical topics is still LGBTQ plus representation. And this is something that you have been growing in your work, book after book. What do you think is your contribution as an author who will reach precisely this more reluctant audience?
I think about generally, and I'm sorry if you've heard this before, I think about how I would like to be depicted by people writing about me or people like myself, right? I'm religious, and when people depict religious characters, I would like them, we don't always have to be the good guys. We don't have to, often I've used religious people as villains, but I want there to be a sincerity there to try and really engage with someone's worldview. And I look at that. I look at how people treat, fans in stories. And I look at, how people treat authors. And I say, when I'm doing that in my books, I think the baseline of anyone that I'm writing about is that I should do my very best so that when people read that book, they say, you know what? He did the work it took to understand as best as someone can who is not part of that community. I think that I want to treat my characters and, everyone as well as I can. And a story that doesn't, a world that doesn't include LGBTQ people is a statement in and of itself, because LGBTQ people exist in the world, and they are our friends and our loved ones. It's hard to even say that without othering them. We are everyone's friends and loved ones. We are part of humanity. And some of us, approach things in some ways. Some of us are born in certain ways. Some of us, it's all just very, very fluid. And if I'm not trying to actually capture that in my books, if I'm not trying to represent what it is like to be a human being from all the different eyes that human beings can be, then what am I even doing? Beyond that, I do think that stories have this power and this problem, in that people read stories and they see the world the way the stories present them. And always seeing the same things be presented, always seeing presentations in a certain way. I'm remembered of the famous interview with little girls who were Black, and they would bring out 2 dolls and say, which one is pretty? And they would always point at the white doll, because all the media that they've been shown, the princess looks a certain way. And I think we who create media, there is an onus placed upon us to do our best, to be thoughtful, to listen. And I would say my best job is to listen, because I'm going to get it wrong. And when you get things wrong, it's in listening that you actually arrive at trying to get it right. So I do feel that there's a deep responsibility there. And I hope that I'm doing a good job. I know that I can do better, and I hope that I will do a better job.
Great. Well, you have a super active fandom that spends quite a lot of time dissecting your work and creating theories about absolutely everything.
They do. Yes.
So I was wondering if there was a seed that you planted that no one has yet realized.
Oh boy, yes, there are a few, but I planted them very obscurely. The thing is, if there's enough foreshadowing, they will guess. And usually I want them to be able to, right? If the foreshadowing is there correctly done, then it's guessable. And the major kind of twists and turns of something like the Stormlight Archive, I learned very early on that it was madness in trying to both foreshadow and completely surprise. And so, but there are things that I seeded, particularly in Stormlight, the first 5, to use in the second 5 that I haven't highlighted and that people don't even know are seeds. So they'll have them there for the back 5 books, particularly the last couple of books, that I'm very pleased with. And there's no way you could have guessed, but you will be able to see that it was there, and it's in a way I haven't done it before. So yeah, I do this all the time. It's a lot of fun, but it's also it's kind of natural to me at this point.
Right, and we love it. We love it.
Some of them are obvious. The prophecies in book 1, the death rattles, were a bit obvious. Some of them are not so obvious. There's ones you guys haven't found.
Okay, now people are gonna dive into it. You talked when you're talking about Ghostbloods, you talked about this being a story that is in your head for a long time, and you have this big schedule. And there's all of those seeds that you are planting. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by everything that is still to be written, or you just feel the joy of doing this work?
I feel the joy of doing this work. This is my work. This is what I'm here to do, or at least I've made myself to do. I'm sure I could have. There are other things I could have done, but this is what I've chosen, and I've set myself up for this. And so I am. I made my bed, and I built it in such a way that I was always doing something new. You can see this in the Stormlight Archive. When I built the outlines for the first 5, I wanted a different theme and tone and type of story for each of them. I worried about writing giant 400,000 word books that felt the same. If that makes sense. Sometimes feeling the same is fine. Like, I don't think it's a flaw in some series that your first book and your second book often kind of repeat the same story beats. Those are often 100,000 word books that are kind of reinforcing what the theme is going to be, and then you break from that. But if you're doing 400,000 word books separated by 3 years in time across 25 years, each of those entries I feel like needs to be its own thing, and needs to not try to do what the book before it did. There's going to be echoes, there's going to be carryovers. And so that is like a big thing to me that lets me make sure that I'm always exploring something new and pushing myself in different ways. And I also let myself alternate between the big series, which, now that I've gotten Stormlight where it is, I can go back to Mistborn for a little while. And I know this is totally and justifiably frustrating to fans to be like, oh man, Mistborn 5, when's the next one? We got to wait for the whole Ghostbloods trilogy to be written. But this is how I stay productive, letting myself switch. And then I now know, following the last few years, I need to let myself occasionally do other things like the novella I wrote this year, or stuff like that. Just need to build in time that occasionally I can explore something completely new.
Great. You have talked several times about your favorite stories and authors who have inspired your work, but we are now increasingly seeing new authors being inspired by you.
Yes.
And not only by your writing style or your universe, your magic system, but also because you are a teacher and you are teaching people different techniques. So what's for you to be on the other side now, seeing things emerge that are inspired in your work as an author and also your contribution as a teacher?
Yeah, this has been the interesting part of my life the last, say, 10 years. For the first 10 years of my career, I was focused very much on this idea of I am the new young upstart who's going to revolutionize the industry. I'm doing different things. And then I became the old guard. And that was an odd transition. I remember in 2015 was when that first hit me. And now this is 10 years later. And I've spent 10 years being the dominant voice in epic fantasy, at least in the States. And it's interesting. I'm flattered that I inspire people. And I'm flattered to see that I have actually created trends and things like that. But it also makes me worried I need to not calcify, right? I need not be the old master who no longer knows what's happening. And people will be responding against me in the same way I was responding against the things that I was reading when I was breaking in. And so, this is a challenge as much as it is an honor to a creator's career.
Wow. People are keeping you in your toes.
They are. Yep, they definitely do that.
Well, you have shared a bit of the history of your international editions in your social media recently. And you also have shown that even today, as a very successful author, you have gone through times when several countries were not interested in publishing you. And I here can mention Brazil itself, which went years without your books and with the books out of print until Trama come along and regain the rights. And I think that your answer here can work also for the writers that are watching this interview on Fliff, and also for the fans, because I think the fans sometimes get concerned about the waves of the publishing market. And I attended Dragonsteel last year.
Oh, did you? Oh, yes. Good to see you. Yeah.
And I remember you talking in a panel that you like to pay attention into the publishing market and know how things are going. So can you tell us a little bit, how do you see the fantasy market today, especially outside the US? Do you think the market is more open, that we are increasing publication? Or
I think we are getting there. But it feels like a lot of places outside, like, the US and the UK, they tend to lag behind what we're doing a little bit. And this is pretty natural because the way that most people experience fantasy is through video games and not through books, right? And a lot of the video games really, for a long time, settled into those classic Tolkien-esque sort of narratives, particularly like the Japanese RPGs and whatnot, and then kind of built on their own. And so we see fantasy of a more traditional vein tending to do well in a lot of the world. And as video games shift, and as movies do things, as we see things like Arcane, which push the boundaries of what people would expect from traditional fantasy in some really excellent ways, as they start to do the things the books have been doing for a while, I hope to see that make more waves in the book world around the world. One of the big issues that I think we have is that because worldwide fantasy communities tend to be smaller in a lot of countries than they are in, say, the US and the UK, it's impossible for local authors to make a living selling to that community, which means we miss out on the local, in-language authors that make fantasy communities so much more powerful. Like, you can see the places that fantasy does best. I sell best in places that have really good local authors who are fantastic writers that pull people in. We sell really well in Poland. Why? Sapkowski is Polish, right? We sell well in Germany because you have Cornelia Funke and people like this, right? And so I think a vibrant community that can support authors and readers supporting local writers writing in language to build that community so that it can actually be a career to pull people in. We're just going to have a better and more vibrant fantasy community around the world if we do that. So I'm always glad when I'm selling. I love selling around the world. And I love telling my stories, and I love meeting people. But I also think that's just a really vital part. And I would love to see, that really can't happen until we grow these communities. So we have these video game people reading fantasy novels as well. So I see it improving. I really do. Brazil recovering is a big deal. Watching the sales in Colombia and some of the places in South America, seeing the love of fantasy in India, even though the market isn't huge there, these indicate to me that there is growth.
Great. This next question comes straight from a reader. His name is Arthur Dutra, and he wants to know if you could open a rift in the Cosmere and allow any character, any fantasy character of a different story, of a different author to enter your universe, who would be and how investiture would affect this character?
Well, let's see. Who would I steal? Who am I? I think one of my favorite characters in all of fiction is Terry Pratchett's Sam Vimes. And I would love to see what Sam Vimes thought of a Cosmere world. I don't know if Terry Pratchett is well read in Brazil, but he is just wonderful, and they're comedic. And Sam Vimes is this just grumpy police detective who is always grouchy about everything and gets things done, and he does them well, but that's just because that's how they have to be done. And I think he would come and be bemused and befuddled, but would he have an investiture? It would be fun to make him have to play with being an Allomancer, because he would not like it. He would hate it. It would be a lot of work. Sam Vimes does not like doing work. So.
We have a few Terry Pratchett, but we don't have all of them.
If people are interested in trying Terry Pratchett, my recommendation is that you start with either the book The Truth, the book Going Postal, or the book Guards. Don't read Pratchett from the beginning. Everyone makes this mistake. He really found his voice after like book 5 or 6, and he started new series with new characters in the same world. And the first books are still delightful if you like Terry Pratchett, but a lot of the books are just some of the best fantasy ever written. But you don't get to those until you dig into some of those later sub-series. So,
this is my last question. And in your speech at Dragonsteel, you talked about how important was for the fandom to embrace new readers and do not create barriers or even diminish each person's experience based on what they choose to read. And you mentioned the success of Romantasy.
Yes.
We have a panel on Fliff that is about Romantasy. So I was
Excellent.
wondering if you have any romanticists to recommend us, either that you read or from some
Okay.
authors whose work you follow.
Okay. So the ones that I've read are the ones everyone's read, right? ACOTAR, Fourth Wing. Like, I'm just kind of keeping up on what they're doing. But I'll tell you this. My favorite romantic fantasy that I would consider a romantasy, even though it doesn't follow all the tropes, is Dragon Prince by Melanie Ron. And it is 30 years old now. So finding a copy of Dragon Prince is probably hard, but it even has a romance novel cover. And as a teenager, this is one of the books that made me fall in love with fantasy. And I highly recommend it. And so otherwise, I've been just reading the ones that everybody else is reading and trying to keep track of how this is all going and how it's working, and what the differences are between these stories and kind of how we plot traditional fantasy stories and what we can learn from each other and things like that.
Right.
But Dragon Prince is really good.
Okay, so that's it for the interview. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
I think I can say this in the name of every Brazilian reader. We hope to see you here in Brazil soon.
I will make my way there eventually, I'm sure. I mean, I hear you have the best meat, the best barbecue in all the world. And I've eaten at Brazilian barbecue here in the States, and I'm sure it doesn't hold a candle to the real thing. So I need to get down there to Churrascaria and let you guys take care of me and show me how it's really done.
Yeah, we will.
Okay, bye-bye, Brazil.